Hello, my name is TWANE WESSELS, and I have been a Fellow of the Actuarial Society of South Africa since 2012. I'm grateful for this opportunity to present to you today on this virtual platform as part of the Society's 50th Annual Convention. And I'm very excited to share my research with you today called Technical Experts as Managers and Servant Leaders. The research has been part of my MBA with the Stellenbosch Business School under the superb guidance of my supervisor, Professor Mias de Klerk, who is a professor in leadership and a business behavior consultant. As actuaries, we are technical experts. I have experienced significant growth through the research and writing process. And talking to an audience of technical experts today, I hope that you can also find value in the presentation. The agenda for today, I'll discuss why leadership by technical experts is important. I'll touch on the challenge that sometimes exists. And then I'll take you through my research objectives and the methodology. I'll introduce the different leadership styles and then discuss the research findings that include leadership challenges, factors that will make it easier to adopt a servant leadership style, and the relevance of servant leadership for the technical expert. Finally, we'll discuss the implications or the impact that the research can have. Why is this research important? Because leadership by technical experts is important, especially in situations that demand elevated levels of technical knowledge and expertise, like we find in insurance companies. When we look at the history, the lack of expert knowledge at the top of organizations may have contributed to the economic turmoil in 2008, because some CEOs lacked the knowledge necessary to fully understand the core business of their organizations. But here is the challenge. Sometimes technical experts are promoted to managerial positions with little or no prior leadership development or experience, and this leads to leadership inefficiency to the detriment of the organization, of subordinates, and the technical expert him or herself. And secondly, technical professions increasingly require a broader skill set because of the rapid pace of change and the complexity of the environment in which organizations operate. In my own experience in the industry, I have noticed the significant influence that leadership can have. It can inspire and it can motivate, but it can also frustrate and diminish. Leadership is a developmental journey, and my journey has led me to this topic of research. I wanted to better understand leadership in the world of the technical expert. The research objectives of this study were as follows. Technical experts as managers sometimes experience leadership challenges that lead to ineffective and inefficient leadership. The main aim of this study was to explore if servant leadership can help technical experts to improve their leadership. In the endeavor to achieve this main research objective, the secondary research objectives were to consider the leadership challenges that the technical experts experience and to look at the factors that can make it easier or harder to be a servant leader. In terms of the research methodology, I stepped out of my comfort zone and opted to do a qualitative study instead of a quantitative study. I conducted 16 interviews of 1 hour each. In phase 1, I interviewed 8 participants that report to a technical expert manager. And in phase 2, I interviewed 8 technical experts in senior to executive management positions. The two phases were necessary to mitigate a social desirability bias, and the participants in phase 1 and 2 were independent of each other. So the subordinates in phase 1 did not report to the specific technical experts in phase 2. The majority of my participants were from the actuarial profession. An introduction to the different leadership styles. Servant leadership was conceptualized by Greenleaf in 1970, and he said the servant leader is servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. Servant leadership goes hand in hand with another coaching style of leadership called transformational leadership. And transformational leadership is a leadership style that empowers people to accomplish positive change through big vision, inspiration, and a call to action. An in-depth study of the literature showed that servant leadership and transformational leadership can be distinguished from each other. For the transformational leader, the primary focus is on achieving the organizational objectives. And for the servant leader, the primary focus will be on the growth of their subordinates. So consequently, the transformational leader will focus more on achieving the organizational goals in the short term, with less focus on the long-term benefits of the growth of their subordinates. Both servant leadership and transformational leadership differs significantly from transactional leadership. Transactional leadership is based on a bureaucratic authority and focuses only on task completion. Let us now move to the findings of the research. For this presentation, I have summarized the findings both from the literature review and from the research results. The first leadership challenge that technical experts as managers may experience is in the interpersonal or the relationship domain. With all of our training being so focused on the technical matters up to qualification, often the relationship or the interpersonal domain is not that well developed compared to the technical domain. So the findings of the research indicated firstly that technical experts may struggle to relate to subordinates on a human level. Here the subordinates indicated that they feel a disconnect with their managers and they struggle to build a relationship beyond the formal work relationship. Managers also didn't always know what motivates their subordinates. And all of this wasn't because of hierarchy, because most of the subordinates did indicate that they do feel that their relationship with their manager was on an equal footing. I'd like to share a direct quote from one of the subordinate participants. But I never really developed that personal connection with him because he was just a little bit robotic. So he's definitely trying, but it almost feels forced, you know? The second challenge was egocentric thinking. And it seemed difficult for the technical expert manager to look at a problem from another person's perspective. And this may be because of a knowledge gap. It may also be because of looking at the problem from a different reference point, for example, from a theoretical point of view and not from a practical point of view. This may make it very difficult for technical expert managers to manage people with different professional backgrounds. Another direct quote from one of the subordinate participants: they expect everybody to know what they've collected over the years. And finally, the last challenge, technical experts may have limited influence higher up in the hierarchy. This may limit exposure and development opportunities for their subordinates. And it may be because technical expertise is seen more as an input to business decision making rather than a driver for business decision making. And this was mentioned by one of the subordinate participants. The perception that business holds of the technical expert as being involved only in technical matters may also be a negative reinforcing cycle here. And finally, the less developed relationship domain or the interpersonal domain may then make it difficult for the technical expert to have influence higher up in the hierarchy as well. So, how can servant leadership help the challenge in the relationship or the interpersonal domain? Well, servant leaders move beyond self interest and focus on subordinates. And they view leadership as a relationship by generating high levels of trust. And this leads to improved collaboration and stakeholder management. Finally, a servant leader is able to influence without using authority. After the challenge in the relationship or the interpersonal domain, the second leadership challenge that technical experts often face is the tyranny of competence. This is when an individual manages from their technical experience rather than with interdependent action that may be required at the time. It is all about getting the job done and offering a complete solution instead of guiding subordinates towards finding the solution themselves. In her book Multipliers, Liz Wiseman refers to this as being a rescuer. Servant leadership can mitigate the rescuer dilemma because servant leaders provide and delegate stretch assignments. It is a coaching style of leadership, and servant leaders encourage autonomy and for subordinates to think for themselves. Another leadership challenge that the literature highlighted was knowledge sharing. And here the expert faces a conflict of interest. From a collective perspective, it's good for them to share their knowledge. But from an individual perspective, it was costly to acquire the knowledge and they may be giving away their competitive advantage. However, the interviews indicated that the technical expert managers were very willing to share their knowledge. And the challenge was rather the lack of delegation and limited time capacity. So why is this? Some of the discussions indicated that the technical expert managers may be task-driven and prefer the technical work. So this may then contribute to the lack of adequate delegation. Also, technical experts during their training and from a very young age, they've learned to be self-reliant and to perform as individuals. So to now collaborate and to give away control may require more effort. Of course, the tyranny of competence and the lack of delegation, coupled with a heavy workload, all contributes to having limited time capacity. And this is to the detriment of the subordinates, as highlighted by one of the technical expert participants. So everyone is just, I guess, stretched to the max in terms of getting to everything. And I think that's what happens to me when I'm under pressure. I just want to get the stuff done. So how can servant leadership help? Servant leadership is about the desire to contribute to the collective good. And it shifts the focus from the individual performance to the empowerment of the subordinates. The last leadership challenge to note is the paradox of power. A technical expert has expert power, which may lead to competitiveness and overconfidence that inhibits advice taking. Findings from the interviews suggested that technical experts are open to listening to alternative views and opinions, but there may be resistance to accepting alternative views. Subordinates were not convinced that technical expert managers truly value obtaining broader perspectives and differing opinions. Accepting alternative views seemed to depend on how convinced or comfortable a technical expert manager is with the topic. So, in their area of expertise, technical expert managers may struggle the most with the paradox of power as a leadership challenge. This was confirmed by a quote from one of the technical expert manager participants. But I also guess it depends on how comfortable I feel with the topic and how convinced I am of my own opinion. Servant leadership can help with the paradox of power because two cornerstones of servant leadership are humility and authenticity. And a servant leader values and utilizes the power of collective thinking. The good news is that there are many factors that can help us as technical experts to be servant leaders. Subordinates want access to the knowledge, the skills, and the expertise of technical expert managers. Also, the authority and the credibility and the status of technical experts helps to enhance the respect for them and also their ability to influence as a leader. Secondly, the legacy motive for many technical experts goes beyond just making a difference on a technical level to making an impact on people. One of the technical expert managers indicated in the interview how interesting it was to explore their legacy motive versus what they are currently doing and realizing just how disjointed it is. Servant leaders create servant leaders. Many of the technical expert managers indicated that they were fortunate enough to have another servant leader as an example, maybe in the form of another manager or even their parents. The example of a servant leader allows for the opportunity to have first-hand experience of the benefits of servant leadership. And this inspires subordinates to become servant leaders themselves. The organizational culture, or where the organization is in its growth cycle, can also have an influence on how hard or easy it is to adopt a servant leadership style. And finally, interpersonal and leadership skills improve with experience, to the point that many of the technical expert managers indicated that now their leadership skills are their competitive advantage in a technically dominated environment. Circling back to the main aim of this study, which was to explore if and how servant leadership can be relevant to the technical expert as manager to improve leadership efficiency. The participants of the interviews were divided, with one half saying that if the organizational objectives are met, everyone benefits, and that if the business grows, it will create more growth opportunities for staff. And the other half saying you need people to carry the organization forward, and that by empowering subordinates, you also create more space for the leaders to grow strategically. So ultimately, this requirement of a balance in focus may indicate that a balance between a transformational and a servant leadership style may be the most suitable. However, whether transformational leadership is the right solution is a matter of further research because there are a few critiques of transformational leadership. I'll end off with potential implications of the research for managers and the profession. Leadership awareness and development for technical experts must start long before they are promoted to a managerial level. There are many leadership development opportunities during a technical expert's education and training. Governing bodies of professions like ASA can consider to include leadership as a module in professionalism courses. Interpersonal leadership skills improve with experience. Coaching and mentorship can accelerate experience-based learning. It is very important in the workplace and by governing bodies of professions. I know that ASA already does really well to include mentorship within the profession. It may be helpful for technical experts to apply visionary thinking and define their legacy motive much earlier in their careers, because then the impact that they would like to have on the people that they work with would be an important priority from early in their careers. And finally, organizations can play their part by ensuring an appropriate allocation towards people management in key performance criteria, and by allowing managers enough time to spend on this objective. I'd like to leave you with this quote from John Quincy Adams. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. If you have any questions or if you'd like to discuss the topic, you are more than welcome to contact me. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this presentation.